Hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. I am here today with Rich Lowry. Rich, how are you doing?
Doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing good. So, Rich, can you tell yourself? Can you describe yourself? Just say what you do for the listeners.
So I'm a associate professor of finance at the University of Texas, Austin. So I teach. I do research mostly in kind of applied game theory about financial institutions, and I teach various business classes to undergrads and MBAs. That's pretty much who I am.
Yeah.
Um,
A- And we're having you on today to talk not about your uh, work necessarily, but basically your experience with trying to create something new at the University of Texas. I mean, in for these podcasts, we're interested in people's academic works, we're interested in research, but we're also interested in sort of the entire concept of trying to build new institutions, different avenues for prestige, particularly in academia and other elite institutions. So you were also involved with the Liberty Institute, is that right?
yeah, I mean, roughly, we sort of a few of us decided that the current way things are functioning at universities is, I don't know exactly how strong to say it, completely absurd is the nicest way I could put it, and that there needed to be serious changes to how things are being done, and students needed to go back to actually learning information and reasoning methods and things like that, rather than what they're getting now in most of their core classes, which is just here's what you need to do to be an effective advocate for particular extreme political positions, which is, at some point you start running into these finance undergraduates, and the smart ones roll their eyes and tell you the stories about all the ridiculous classes they have to take to fulfill core requirements. And the less smart ones come in with these really toxic ideas about capitalism and society and all of that. And you're like, well, here's why banking creates value. And they're like, no, you're all evil. And so it sort of becomes this, yeah, you got one group of people who are completely brainwashed and this other group of people who have had their time wasted. And so we felt it might be time to do something about that. So we tried.
Yeah. So this conversation is based off your recent article for the James G. Martin Center that we'll link to called "How UT Austin Administrators Destroyed an Intellectual Diversity Initiative." Before we get to that, so you're in the business school, correct?
Yeah.
And finance, you wouldn't think of it as inherently a very political field. Is this? But you're saying it has become political, or has it always been? How is that, and how has it changed over time?
I mean, I think it's changed radically just in the past few years. I mean, you've been able to see it coming, but you know, a lot of sort of older finance professors view all of this as not their problem. Like the university has gone crazy, but we have our little corner where we still just talk about how to create value in firms. But if you look at everyone's talking about ESG and every environmental, social, and governance stuff. Everyone's talking about how you should be using your firms to advance social goals rather than um, profit, which is basically we should give up creating value for people and splitting consumer surplus and producer surplus, and instead we should take control of firms and turn them into social engineering things. We have like a sustainability major that's explicit, like the description of the major is explicitly like, here's how you can go enter a firm and manipulate it into becoming a advocate for leftist revolution. And I mean, this is a business school in the state of Texas. So the whole university is, people in business schools kind of recognize that the university has gone nuts, but it's getting more and more. And our current dean just completely wants to throw away the whole idea of teaching people how to operate in a firm and doing good things, and wants to change the world and bring in diversity, equity, and inclusion, all that. So yeah, it's getting pretty awful even in business. um,
The ESG, isn't it? I mean, isn't don't firms have a legal obligation to maximize shareholder value? How did ESG get in there? Am I wrong about that?
I mean, nobody this is one thing you learn in finance is all these rules that people say that public firms have to abide by are kind of, they're very squishy, and nobody really knows what they mean, and it all comes down to whatever in you know whoever gets on the SEC's radar and they decide they're doing something wrong. So nobody in the federal government is going to crack down on somebody for destroying shareholder value in order to promote, you know, the interests of marginalized groups. Even if technically, if you read the rules, probably you shouldn't do that. But no one thinks that the feds are going to crack down on them for wasting shareholder money on that sort of thing. So it's effectively not illegal. It ought to be. You ought to face shareholder lawsuits, but all this has to get you for to be really effective. You would need the SEC backing it up, and they're just going to say, "Oh no, as long as you're setting aside certain things to promote this political agenda, we're never going to touch you." If anything, if you actually pursued shareholder value without paying at least lip service to this type of activism, that's when you're going to get the attention of the regulators, and that's when they're going to start causing trouble. Like Elon Musk suddenly people start poking around in his affairs as soon as he says he doesn't want to do that sort of thing. So despite making electric cars, cool. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. This is
even
something
before,
anyone with,
sorry, go ahead.
no, anyone with any knowledge of sort of administrative law knows that this is not unique to business, that there's an infinite number of laws and they often have vague standards on top of vague standards, and they can't go after every possible violation. So technically there's, I guess, a legal case against ESG, but yeah, that makes sense. It doesn't matter that much. So do you guys so you guys tried to do something new at University of Texas. How did this come about?
So we had a small policy center that still exists. It's not that small anymore. It's now called the Salem Center for Policy, and this was a thing that was some money that was floating around that nobody wanted because icky people had donated it, because nobody wants to be associated with money that was actually earned through the creation of decent consumer products or anything. And so one of my friends, Carlos, I think Carlos,
Of course.
Carvalho,
Yeah.
uh,
You're
kind of
you're
took over.
we're all affiliated with the Salem Center. You're in the Salem Center. I'm part of the Salem Center. Carlos is our boss. So yeah, go ahead.
Uh, so yeah, anytime Carlos has ever tried to make me do anything, you might have an interesting description of boss there. But he runs this center, and basically we had this center. We were trying to do things. We were doing programming, but we couldn't really get what really needed to be done. We needed the ability to offer students a different perspective in their classes than they're getting currently from sort of core classes in the university. And we started this freshman seminar to fulfill one of the requirements, and we try to give so 50 students a year get to see something that isn't nuts about economics and statistics, which has actual information and all of that. But 50 students isn't going to make that much of a difference. And then we looked at all the other people offering these freshman seminars, and those syllabuses are just nuts. And we saw more and more of this. So we came up with the idea, and we got some encouragement from some supporters. I may have suggested that we start using the University of Texas's recommended land acknowledgement in some of our meetings with supporters. So we're supposed to get up in front of every public event and talk about how we're actually on Turtle Island and acknowledge that we really are, the Comanches should really be in charge or something like that. And so this sort of thing, gradually, some of our supporters recognized that there probably needed to be more done. And so we were, chomping at the bit to do this. And so we came up with this proposal where we would create sort of an independent unit, like a college of reasonable dissenting thought. And this kind of snowballed quickly. There were some supporters who were excited about it. Some people in the Texas government thought that Texas might be willing to just fund this directly, so it got in the budget. We got money for it. There was a whole agreement between the university and the Texas government about what this was going to be. We were going to be able to offer, hire faculty who wouldn't be able. Right now, if you have sensible thoughts, there are very few departments at the University of Texas where you can be hired. Like, if you have sensible thoughts about society, you might be able to get hired in petroleum engineering as long as you keep them to yourself.
Yeah.
But if
And
you
so for
have,
people people listening to this, they might not, I mean, they might not have been in college for a while. I mean, they might not, they might think you sound crazy and that, none of, it can't possibly be that bad. But me and you, you're in a university now. I've, been in universities recently. It's bad. There's, I think what they could show to people to say is the diversity statements. You basically, when you're hired now, and maybe promotion or other things too, you have to, express support for affirmative action, identity politics. It's not subtle. It's not like, your research is like has this bias, this little bias or that little bias. It's like there's loyalty oaths to the
Yep, you
regime at this
swear
point.
allegiance to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the particular definition of diversity. I mean, that's bad enough. We shouldn't have. I mean, I'm actually okay with like, hey, if you're coming to work for a state university, you shouldn't be advocating for overthrowing that government and replacing it with a totalitarian dictatorship. If someone proposed that loyalty oath, I would at least consider it. But you shouldn't have a loyalty oath to specific policies, and you certainly shouldn't have a loyalty oath to specific stupid policies. And what we have now is loyalty oaths to, the idea that we should have proportionate representation by identity groups with at least as much representation from marginalized groups as they are in the general population, rather than population. Plus, all those marginalized people who are hired for diversity must have a critical consciousness. So they must all be, so if you manage to hire Thomas Sowell, he doesn't count. Wilfred Riley doesn't count. So and not only is that the policy of the university, we all have to say we like that policy, or we can't get promoted. Like, I'm never going to be a professor. I can say that right now because I will never be able to score on that. And then inclusion, we have to be inclusive, which their definition means we can't ever say anything that makes marginalized groups with critical consciousness unhappy. So, in order to be employed at the University of Texas, you have to kind of commit to never stating a fact, no matter how true it is, that makes a marginalized person feel a member of a marginalized group. This could be a multimillionaire who happens to belong to one of these marginalized groups. If you make him unhappy, and not only do you have to commit to not making these people unhappy, you have to commit to supporting a policy of inclusion, i.e., don't make these people unhappy throughout. So yeah, it's that
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. And equity is
Right.
do they give you trouble for if you have a race blind, if you have a sort of woke capitalism, are they okay with that, or even is even the sort of the capitalist idea sort of hard to maintain on the
So
university?
I'm a little so it's okay for some people to get super rich as long as the number of people who are super rich is in proportion to
Yeah.
their share of the population. So it's okay. This is a great trick on the equity. It's like, okay, it's okay for like a handful of white people to be really rich, as long as we make sure that people from other groups are also really rich. But we need to make sure they didn't make their money through sort of ugly capitalism. It's okay to make your money by writing books about how horrible
No, but
society is.
that's just sort of the ideology. I'm wondering about sort of the litmus tests. Are there there was a some Substack I saw the other day about what's happened to the American Political Science Review, which was the top journal of political science. They basically a few years ago uh, they had a editorial board that was all women, purposely, and then they, each of them study some kind of identity politics thing, and they were basically explicit about affirmative action. Are the finance journals or the business journals, or I mean, are they that bad yet, or is it
Um,
still are you still behind?
so econ has gotten So econ is probably worse than most people think political science is, but political science is so horrible people can't even probably conceive of that.
Yeah,
But I, uh, the most recent AEA papers and proceedings, that's the most important conference in economics. It was overwhelmingly woke stuff. It was overwhelming identity discrimination. You always have to find, and in economics, even in economics, you have to find the right answer, or you're going to have a lot of trouble publishing. So I know people who found some very counter woke empirical evidence, and then they just sort of like, oh, well, that's never getting published. So I think it's safe to say that economics is worse than you would think the norm is, but it's still better than most. Finance is still a little, because most of asset pricing, things like that it's somewhat hard to politicize. But if you write an ESG paper, you really need to say that ESG is really good and we should all do this. You can't be sort of objective about it. A handful of people still are, but there are already full professors at Chicago. So
Yeah.
it,
Who's
it,
that? Who's that? Who's that professor who wrote I think you're referring to a blog post about the recent economics papers. Who was
uh,
a
uh, John Cochran talked about that
yeah.
a bit.
Right.
Yeah. So that's a good post to go through.
Yeah, economics is
John,
getting there. I mean, you hear these complaints that economics is hostile towards women, women this, women that. That sort of seems to be the opening to change everything
yeah,
else,
and it's
talking about gender bias.
they're pushing that, and they're making it so that um, this kind of inclusion idea is coming hard into economics. Like you should not be criticizing the work of these people because they are somehow marginalized from economics. Now, there's no evidence whatsoever that there's been a systematic exclusion of women from economics. For a long time, people didn't want to do that. I mean, only weird people want to do economics. So
That's true.
suddenly judging that um, that that should be in any reasonable proportion to any group is odd. But yeah, and very, very few people, very few of the sort of older men who are in a position of authority in economics are willing to stand up in any way to any of these accusations. They just melt immediately and then hire. Like, I mean, Chicago has been, I think, illegally hiring entirely based on sex for a number of years, or they did for a while. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
pretty bad.
Chicago's sad. Yeah, I mean, this stuff is happening quickly. I mean, if you got out of academia 5 years ago, I mean, it's a different world. So yeah, I mean, I'm convinced. You're convinced. I don't think there's any dispute about how bad it is for anybody who's willing to sort of look at these things objectively, unless you're a social justice warrior and you think all this stuff is great
Yep.
anyway. I think if you're skeptical of this stuff, you have to understand academia is pretty bad. So anyway, so you guys tried to do
So
something
we
about
wanted to
it.
carve out one place where a few University of Texas students could get a sensible education with like objective facts, objective methodology, and not have to go through all of this and maybe get, we had this idea of offering a degree of like sensible history. It's nothing
Well, you keep
particularly
saying
innovative.
sensible and objective. Like, how do you? I mean, when you describe sort of what you wanted to do compared to what the university is normally doing. I mean, I think you need to be. I think they would say they're sensible and objective. So what's the sort
Well,
of
I
the?
don't know, because I think like objective analysis is white supremacist, right? So
Yeah,
they're
I think you're right.
fairly
I think you're right. They wouldn't say objective. They would say sensible, given the
they're,
circumstance, social
they're
realities, or something.
right.
Yeah.
So let's just say we would like to not start with the conclude. We don't want to start with any set of conclusions, much less ones that are so clearly at odds with reality. So,
Right.
we want to go back to how, gather evidence, test
Yeah.
hypotheses, that sort of thing, which
And
is
I think it's useful
very
to
much,
be explicit about what their sort of what their conclusion is starting with. It's that capitalism is bad. It's
yes.
bad for the planet, bad for humans. Every group should have equal representation in a just society.
Well, I think any just society, the historically marginalized groups will have at least proportionate representation. So if we suddenly woke up, like it's perfectly fine that the entire board of the APSA
is
is
women, of
women.
course.
That's not a problem. That's not that disproportion is not a problem because they are historically marginalized, which is not a term that's particularly well defined. You basically just pick people that you like and say they should have more stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
and then you have, I guess, you have blank slateism, the idea that differences between classes, differences between genders, that's all something that society decided we should have, rather than something that reflects something inherent in people.
yeah,
And so I think it's good. I think it's good to sort of flesh out exactly
yeah. And I mean,
where they're
I
wrong.
think the core thing that I think underlies most of this is that whatever you say needs to be judged not by whether it is true or false, but by whether it promotes the interest of these particular groups. So I think that is the fundamental ideology underlying higher education right now, is that whatever you say, whatever you publish, must be promoting the interest of these
Well,
groups, and
yeah.
whether it's true or not is irrelevant. And we kind of would like to go away from that
But it's not. It's not. You can't just promote them in it. So if you think capitalism is the best source of social mobility, you think anti-discrimination laws do more harm than good. Like you could say that I'm saying this for the sake of the marginalized group, but that wouldn't be acceptable. I mean, there's some
oh
conclusions
no,
that you just can't. Yeah, you can't say
so
it.
I mean, what I said is, I think, describes it accurately, but that also within that specific conclusions of what it is that promotes those things are already
Yeah, yeah.
built in.
So you're at
You
the
cannot, you're not allowed to find out that capitalism promotes the interest of marginalized groups. Yeah, that's right. You must, everything you say must promote the interest of marginalized groups, and it must do so through this particular lens of kind of racialized neo-Marxism.
right.
So that
And so you guys wanted to do something different. So anyways, I keep interrupting, but go ahead to tell the story.
yeah, so we wanted to do something different. So we proposed this, and the idea would be here. We're going to hire a bunch of faculty who don't assume their conclusions and aren't ex ante committed to any particular set of policies, and who would be unlikely to get hired in the current environment, uh, regardless of quality, just because you can't hire people who don't agree with this nonsense anymore. It seemed pretty reasonable. This is just a matter of like, let's go back to how people used to think about problems before everyone went crazy. Um, and this was a fairly appealing to a broad swath of non-academics. And this was approved, and then we were excited. We were going to start building. We were going to hire people. We were going to offer classes. It was going to be an absurd amount of work. I mean,
And who approved it? I'm sorry, I'm very interested in the mechanics here because people who want to, maybe do something
so
similar or know how this stuff works.
we got things. We got a line and the main budget for Texas. So we got 2 years worth of funding with the assumption that so it was $3 million a year. The
So some
regents
state
agreed to throw in
legislator
another.
wrote it into a bill. The governor signed it, like you learn
Yep.
in civics class. Okay, go
Yep.
ahead.
Yeah, with I'm sure plenty of sausage making that we were kind of away from. The Board of Regents agreed to match this out of their, they get a giant. Board of Regents gets a giant pile of money then in the budget, and then the university, then the legislature will provide funding for other specific things. So we got funding directly from the legislature, plus the regents agreed to throw in more money. And then, of course, if this had gotten going, there were lots of donors who were ready to give us even more money, because that's one of the problems. Like, if you want sensible things to happen on campus, you kind of have to pay the university in order to be allowed to fund something sensible. So if you want non-crazy speakers on campus, you have to, if you're a rich guy and you think the University of Texas should have sensible people speak occasionally, you have to fund that and pay a tax to the university. Whereas if you want some crazy person coming in,
They'll do that
they'll spend money.
voluntarily. Yeah.
Um, so we got this. The regents gave the money, and so now this money flows to the president's office, and he's supposed to go and get this set up. And there was this whole idea that the sense you have to do a national search for who's going to run this, but Carlos was a good candidate, and the ideas were proposed to him, like he was going coming up with the faculty he'd want to work with, and we were talking about who we'd want to bring in, all of that, and then we got ignored for 6 months. And so approximately 6 months. So no communication from the president's office. We're just waiting around. And then
you and Carlos were the driving forces behind getting all this.
Yeah, I think. I mean, Carlos was the one. He was the one out talking to people, and it was kind of us. We had all curriculum planned out. We had lists of names, and then somebody planted an article in the Texas Tribune, which is this like left wing Texas pseudo news organization that basically just it's really an advocacy thing, and they've got close ties to people in the university administration. I don't know who planted it, but they came out with this big expose on the Liberty Institute and how all these evil West Texas millionaires were interfering in the sacred trust of the University of Texas, and that suddenly politics was going to make its way in to the University of Texas, as if we haven't converted ourselves entirely into a left-wing activist machine for the past 5 years. And so then now it turns out the president had picked one of his deputies to be sorting out how this stuff was going to work, and he picked a critical race theorist. So one of the first things he did was make like hardcore critical race theorist who teaches like Marxist dance and doesn't believe there should be a single conservative voice on campus. He made him vice president of academic priorities. Now, this is the guy who's now in charge of figuring out how to set up this new dissenting entity. So we've got a critical race theorist in charge. This article comes out. I don't know if that's a coincidence.
Which came first, the
And
article or the critical race theorist?
so it turned out the critical race theorist had been in charge for months that we didn't know about. And then, article comes out, president's like, oh no, we can't do what we used to do. He calls in Carlos for this meeting. And then the critical race theorist is sitting there dictating exactly how the thing would be structured. And the idea is, okay, Carlos, we'll let you run this. As long as you just give money to existing departments to hire people they would hire anyway. And you can ask them to hire people, but you can't do anything. So the whole idea of like an independent group, like you cannot hire a sensible person with the assent of the anthropology or sociology department. So the idea is like, okay, you've gotten this money for this independent thing. Instead, we're just going to use it to fund the wish lists of existing departments. And you just go around and tell all the conservative donors and politicians that everything is fine and this is the right way to do it. Now, all of this is the plan of a critical race theorist who's been trusted to bring dissenting, non-leftist thought. So, and at this point, obviously we're not going to go along with that nonsense. We don't have, we have better things to do with our time than provide cover for the president to let critical race theorists run the University of Texas. So Carlos tells the supporters, is no, this isn't what we agreed to. We're not going to do this. And that's when with a single exception, the donors turned on us. The president starts doing his people don't really like the sole qualification for being a president of a university in a red state is that you're good at lying to Republicans. So he manages to get the donors convinced that we're the problem. We won't play along with the critical race theorist plan, so we're putting the thing in danger. The thing is dead, but they turn on us. The state doesn't step. We communicate clearly. This is a default, but everyone in the Texas state government, they already scored their points from having funding this thing, and they don't care anymore apparently. And well, that's what we thought at the time. It turned out that wasn't entirely true. So we get kicked off the project, and they go out and they find this is another thing. These things, it all sounds crazy because it kind of is. There's this stable of fake conservatives who operate in universities, and their job is they'll come in an initiative like this, and they'll come in as the cleanup guy, and they can go around and be like, oh yeah, I'm one of you, but this is exactly what we need to do. Obviously, we can't interfere with faculty governance, even though that we were going to do everything according to the rules, but they could say, oh no, that was bad. Here, I can work with the sociology department. And of course, they can work with the sociology department because they have a history of always giving in. So they bring in this guy who turns out to be friends with, we have 2 or 3 professional fake conservatives already at UT. They run this thing called the Jefferson Center. Willem Bowden runs this other thing. These guys just basically go out and pretend to donors that everything is fine, take money, pay themselves, pay their friends, and then do nothing and provide cover for the left to control the university. So they bring in one of their friends from Missouri who had this same deal. University of Missouri, there was a big mess. They didn't, there were crazy faculty out yelling at students, and some conservatives gave money to try to provide a separate thing. And this guy comes in and he takes the money and he brings in a leftist, and they agree on how to spend the money to make sure that the conservatives stop being angry at Mizzou. So that's the guy they bring in with a secret search with his friend who's already here, and we're pushed out, and this guy gets tenure at UT to run this thing, take the money, give it to existing departments, and make sure that everyone sort of stays happy. So
the Liberty Institute is still under this guy's control. It's still at UT.
Well, they've just announced that he was and it's now being called the Civitas Institute because liberty is a loaded word, and we don't want to use that.
But yeah, so I want to see what exactly Let me. I want to Google a little bit. So, do they have events? They don't have their own professors. All they do is they have.
It's
So they just funnel money to
they
sociology
haven't
or
done
whatever.
anything. They wasted a year. Like we would have already had stuff. They wasted a year. He
Uh,
just got appointed. It took him a while. I don't know how they bribed poli sci or government into giving tenure to this guy, but yeah, he
yeah.
just a few weeks ago it got announced. But it was under we got kicked out because we wanted independent hiring. Obviously, there's not going to be independent hiring, or if they give him independent hiring, it'll be under the agreement not to bring anyone in who's actually interesting.
Okay. Yeah.
Um,
I don't know. I haven't done enough research. So I don't want to be unfair to this guy. I'll take your word for it. So I don't know if
yeah,
he's. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I
I don't
know,
know if he's that.
he was reporting on. We were talking to him because he had this thing at Missouri. We thought it was interesting. We were collecting as much information, and then he was like reporting back to the UT administration things we were saying to try to get us kicked out of the project. So he was already spying for the UT administration before we came in. But he wrote a book about how abortion is bad, and so he has credibility with the sort of
Yeah. So they have a press
low.
release. They say Civitas Institute will focus on teaching, understanding, appreciation of American values, blah, 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 constitutionalism, government, free enterprise and markets, individual liberty, putting together politics. That seems to be all they've done
Yeah,
uh,
they have
is a
a launch
press
statement.
release.
But
Yeah,
the
this
last
is,
time, 15
oh,
years ago, Rob Coon.
this was
Sorry.
just a year ago. This was a month ago. This was from June 13th.
Yeah,
It seems like they were,
yeah. So that
you know,
they drag their feet. The goal is to drag their feet and make it look like there's action, so that they don't get found out before the next legislative session, which starts in January. So the university has to make it look like they're doing something for a few more months, so that they don't get in trouble. Because eventually, the lieutenant governor got a little upset and said he was going to end tenure at UT,
uh,
which
So,
wouldn't
so,
be a
that,
good
so the,
idea.
the different models is yours and Carlos's model of liberty would be you would be your own, you would hire your own tenure track faculty. And
Yeah.
this model is just they run Civitas, which they give money to say philosophy or sociology. And then do they consult with them? Do they hire who they what do they do? They just give them money and what else? Like
Well,
how do you ensure that it's going to
they
be
don't. They haven't really written down any agreements or anything. But my understanding is the idea. The promise that the president made in the faculty council is that the institute will not hire tenure track faculty. The money will be given, and so that and the model that was proposed to us is you go and you offer money to existing departments to hire people, and they get to decide who they hire and not. And
Mm.
there's just no way a current department in the humanities or social sciences, except maybe econ, at UT is going to hire anyone who's even remotely.
But does it? Would you have had sort of? Would you been in position to negotiate and get better people with these departments, or would it have to been like you just give them the money and they do what they want?
I mean, the claim would have been that we would have negotiated, but the answer is they would have just taken the money and done whatever they wanted. Probably they would have found some very one of these professional. It would have been an opportunity for them to bring in one of these fake conservatives, because they could bring in someone who would then provide cover, but they're all but when the chips are down, these guys are gonna, like, we have people
Isn't
in
the
law school.
problem that yeah? Isn't the problem that you have to be you have to be a fake conservative to get along in any of these? Like me, I couldn't survive in academia. Like I don't know how you survive. You're older. Maybe you came in at a different time, but it's like anyone they hire within academia who's going to be along is going to have sort of sold their soul on this stuff already, right?
Well, and that was kind of, I mean, if you get, like, I'm 43, I think. If you go much below 40, you're not going to get anyone. Like, the filter really started kicking in a few years after I got through. But what you could do is collect a bunch of 40 to 60-year-olds. Sorry, 40 to 70-year-olds. They're probably people I shouldn't offend in the 60 to 70-year-old group. You could collect those people, and they could start. They could objectively look for objectively high quality people who can't get jobs because they have sensible ideas, right? It wouldn't be that if you got one department that could just go out and hire people, you would have the highest IQ department very quickly, just because there's such a strong filter. People still show up for grad school. In a few years, nobody's even going to go to grad school if they have sensible ideas. So yeah, I need but you need to start nurturing reasonable people again, and you need to collect enough sensible people in one place that they can create the environment where people can come in. Like, we have some very intelligent philosophers who could do an excellent job of evaluating people in all sorts of fields of humanities, but in 15 years they're going to be retired. So we sort of have a window is closing if you want to create younger academics who don't buy into this, it's just an activist project idea.
Yeah. So I
So
think
the
the difference
window's
between you
closing.
and yeah. So the difference between you and I think Dreyer, if Dreyer, if Dreyer was here right now, maybe I'll reach out to him and see if he'll talk to me. If Justin Dreyer was here, maybe he would say his disagreement with you guys, or maybe this is how you understand the disagreement is he thinks that the existing departments are salvageable. There's hope for having, intellectual diversity. It's just, they just need a little push or a little encouragement. And while you think that you just have to sort of start your own thing within the
Yeah, I
university,
mean,
but you need control over
I think
hiring.
that's what he would say. I don't think he would actually believe it. What he believes is, oh, I got tenure at UT Austin. Yay. I mean, that's all there is to
All
it.
right,
Like,
Rich. Let's not jump to conclusions about Mr. Dryer's motive. Yeah, who knows? There's no way of knowing that. So yeah,
I've, I,
so
I've run out of patience with being polite to people. Unfortunately, you ask how I survive in academia. I
yeah,
survive in academia by giving up on even trying anymore on that stuff.
yeah. You must be so exhausted, as they say about the women
Oh yeah,
taking
yeah,
difficult. Yeah. so okay. So
yeah.
the Salem.
If you have any temptation to start feeling sorry for me, the faculty salaries are still public information. So
Okay.
I'm just trying to earn what what the state of Texas pays me instead of just coasting on it.
Yeah, that's very honorable. Yeah, the business schools tend to pay well in general. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll never get a raise again, but that's
Yeah.
fine.
So you're so the okay. So so Salem was Salem. How did Salem start?
Salem. So there was a thing called CPG, and I don't even remember what it stands for. And it was supposed to be providing sort of counter programming, intellectual diversity, and it reported directly to the president. And there was a guy, Ryan Streeter, was running that, and I'm not sure what they ever did, but they had money, and then Streeter left for AEI, and they wanted to keep this going because they needed it to show to conservative donors that there was actual stuff. And so nobody in the university wanted to take it except Carlos volunteered to take it, and that's how. And so he got the money, and then he started raising money, and that's kind of how Salem came into existence. Before it was Salem, and then KK Salem, who's gave a significant gift for
Yeah,
that sort of got things rolling on the branding and allowed us to expand significantly, start bringing in more people. But we can't hire tenure track faculty
right.
because we're just a center.
Yeah. So it's the interesting sort of setup of this. So the governor appoints the board of regents. The board of regents runs the university, right? That's how it works.
That's in principle. So as far as I can tell, the board of regents picks a president and then rubber stamps everything the president does.
I see. So
So
the board of so the president is basically like the dictator of the
yeah, the
university
president
system.
is dictator, um, but the president gets gets to pretend that he answers to the faculty, because there's all this like faculty governance stuff where people claim that the faculty, but if you actually look at the rules, everything the faculty does is advisory to the president. So the president is an absolute dictator. He can do whatever he wants, but he has this excuse built in. It's like, oh no, if I did that, the faculty wouldn't like it, and they literally, the president threatened the donor, said, "No, if we go ahead with the plan as is, the faculty will give me a vote of no confidence, and I'll have to resign," which is nonsense, because all the faculty council can do is advise the president, and they can advise him to resign, and he can tell them to go off. So yeah, at least at the UT, at least within the University of Texas system, the president is effectively the dictator of the university. So everything he wants he can
Yeah.
get.
So yeah, okay. So the Board of Regents could dismiss him. I mean, in theory, right?
They have a term, so they can not renew you after 5 years, and if they want, if it, these rules are a little vague, I think, but they can get you out before your term is up through
Okay.
some method. But other than that, like there was one regent in the history of the University of Texas system, as far as I can tell, who actually tried to do his job. It was Wallace Hall, and he found out there was a lot of admissions corruption, and he was impeached by the Texas Senate, I think, and indicted by the Travis County DA for doing open records requests to the university. So they indicted him for finding out information about the entity that he was supposed to be governing. So that's the extent to which, like, they're hands
What year
off.
was it? What year was this around?
That would have been, it was right after it was either right before or sometime around 2008 to 2010. Um, so, and then, he got pushed out, and that's when they brought in the guy who runs things now, which is Kevin L. Tife, and his whole job is to keep things quiet. But
Yeah. So I guess so. Yeah.
yeah.
So the question here is these are this is a Republican state with Republicans in all positions of power as far as statewide offices. The university system is not an independent branch of government. It completely depends on a
Mhm.
budget coming from the state legislature, signed by the governor. You had those people wanting to do something about the universities. You also had these millionaires who were willing to donate money. It seems like they themselves wanted some kind of more conservative thought on college campuses. um, and I guess what this looks like is that, like, there's these there's a lot of sort of it's very, I mean, it's very sort of hard, I guess, to explain to people with the difference between what it's not hard if you want to sit down and listen, but just like for a casual observer, what you and Carlos wanted to do versus what, the University of Texas wants to do with their money. So, is your experience just that it's basically that like when you talk to donors or you talk to, legislatures or people close to them, it's just hard to get through to these people, or what's your sort of impression of where's the failure here?
Well, I think a big part of the failure is that they don't actually care. Like
They're politicians.
yeah, and the Board of Regents, like you know, they're very averse to anything making noise and causing problems. And so the regents are very focused on making sure everything stays quiet. So the only reason they would go after a president and try to remove him is if there's like chaos, because they want the nice quiet thing going. And so they are, very willing to go along with the president when he says, "Oh no, if I do something like this, there's going to be problems. There's going to be noise." And then the politicians all have a lot of faith in the regents because they're their appointees. Now, who ends up wanting to get on the board of regents? It's apparently a bunch of people who are, they're willing to give money to Republican politicians, or their former, like, former Republican politicians who were very much on the left, even as they were Republicans. And so that sort of layer is really uninterested in doing anything about improving the university, but they do want to keep things quiet. And the faculty know that they can, their power comes from causing a stir. And so it's really very much, what you end up with is you end up hiring the president who you can trust to keep the faculty quiet by giving the faculty whatever they want. So that's why we have two critical race theorists on the 5-person tenure evaluation committee. It's because that's what the faculty want, and that keeps the faculty quiet and happy. And then you have a guy who can go around and like show up at the country club and smile to the rich guys. So that's what they want for a president, is someone who will do everything the woke faculty want while being like pleasant to the rich guys. So the previous president was really good at giving the woke faculty whatever they wanted, but he wasn't really good at being super nice to Republicans. And so they got rid of him and they brought in someone who will still do everything the woke faculty want, but is better at being nice to the president. And that's kind of what the regents want. And then the politicians mostly just want their donors happy, I guess. I don't know. But as far as I can tell, it's really nobody cares that every 18-year-old who shows up at the University of Texas is being trained to be a social justice radical.
And then what about and so that's politicians. What about the donors themselves? Because it seems like they're voluntarily giving their own money. It seems like they
So
have some interest in how it's being spent.
I think, I believe the salary of the president of the University of Texas is $1.2 million. It's somewhere around that, and every penny of that money is being paid to be good at lying to conservative donors or politicians. So they're just hearing, and they're not willing to go and talk to people on the ground. Like, we're too far down the totem pole. They want to talk to the CEO, and they think of a president as like the CEO. That's the only person they should be talking to. Now they don't realize that the whole role of that guy is to lie to them, but they won't talk to anyone except him. So whatever story he tells them, no matter how false, they never hear a different story. So
Isn't the
they're just
yeah? Isn't the answer? Isn't conservative media the answer here? Because you can go around them, right? You can have us. You can make conservatives have a megaphone. I presumably Republican politicians and conservative donors pay attention to Fox News, Washington Examiner, Wall Street Journal, whatever. Isn't that the
well,
sort of is that the way out of this?
you would think, but then when we expose the fact that the president's office was providing grants to the education school to create critical race theory training materials for 4-year-olds, that got picked up by Fox News. I was on Fox and Friends first for like 8 minutes. It's actually, while passing a kidney stone at 3 a.m. It's another interesting story. And we had an article, we had all that, and nobody cared. Like, nobody reacted. No donor. Well, I mean, there are a number of people who were involved in our institute who heard about this. Not one of literally one person out of who involved in any way ever had a conversation with me. The rest of nobody wanted to engage with, like, oh wait, Jay Hartzell is funding critical race theory for 4-year-olds. Maybe we should go talk to the guy who found this out and spoke to Fox News. They would rather just continue to hear from
Is it
Jay
different in
Hartzell.
other states? Because other states seem to be passing laws against critical race theory. They see it's not. It's all just show. It's all just as fake. Because it seems like some laws
At the
are getting
university.
passed.
So people are more engaged at K through 12, and some of the stuff at K through 12 actually matters. And Texas even has a K through 12 bill that doesn't seem to have much teeth, but there are very few. Nobody. I can't think of a single state where anyone's had the courage of putting it in a serious conservative to run the state university. Like, everyone always picks. Mitch Daniels is about the closest you get, and he's leaving. He was at Purdue, and that's where they went. They went outside of the academic hierarchy, because if you want to find a president who looks qualified, you want someone who's been up, someone who's been a dean and has been a provost and all of that. And the only way you get that there is with a really good diversity, equity, and inclusion statement. So if you continue to pick from that set, so even if you look at what happened at the University of Central Florida, they fired and then had to unfire someone for clearly constitutionally protected speech, and that's
So I mean, why can't
Florida.
conservative governors? I mean, when Republican presidents appoint judges, they go to the Federalist, they go to Heritage, and they say, well, here's these are the good people and these are the bad people, and take the good people. Why can't the Heritage have a list of college presidents that you're supposed to appoint if you're a Republican governor?
If anyone would like that list, I am available and can make that.
Okay, so this is. It
I
sounds
don't
like
know why nobody is asking me that question except you. But yeah, I
yeah.
mean, we know there's a handful of people who know who should be running universities in conservative states, but nobody asks us.
Mm.
And that's, I think,
This
we do
seems like
not have an
it seems.
equivalent Federalist Society. We need the equivalent of Federalist Society.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's these groups like Fire, and there's these groups that are sort of try to play the middle and say for free speech and this that. But I think the thing is that that stuff, you have to be sort of ideologically opposed to this stuff, because the what these people do, I think, when you alluded to about the president being paid to be a good politician, is that basically if you give them any wiggle room, if you give them any control, they're going to figure. I mean, they have the numbers within the university system, and
Yeah.
they are familiar with the bureaucratic processes, and they have the time to work on this stuff. So it really has to be, it really has to be like build a new thing, has to be appoint some kind of president who's just completely ideologically opposed to them. It can't be, write them letters and hope they
Yeah.
become a little
I
more
mean,
reasonable.
yeah, without extreme change in leadership, or I mean, even if you try to build new institutions, like the instinct when people are building new institutions is, oh no, we want to be down the middle. We don't want to be ideological. And down the middle means, oh well, let's go find a former college president to run this. And then all of a sudden your new initiative that's supposed to bring diverse of thought suddenly has someone who's completely drunk the Kool-Aid of DEI in charge, and you've already ruined your new institution before you even touch it. You have to think much more outside. Like, if you want to start something new, you have to go find the people who would never, ever, ever have become a college president in the traditional system.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to ruin it before it gets off the ground. There needs to be a little bit more creativity and a little more understanding of like who it is you should trust. You should trust the people who've been sort of pushed to the sides. Um, Again, I have a list. I'm happy to share the list. If you want someone to run something, I got a list.
You want to make it just
But
public? You want to make it public? Does it need to be a private list?
probably I should. Well, I haven't asked anyone on that
Okay,
list whether.
let's not get ahead of ourselves. Okay, yeah,
Uh,
there's a good book, The Rise of the
and it's not
Conservative.
me because I act like this, so you
Yeah,
probably shouldn't
it's
pick
not
me.
you.
But there's plenty of far more acceptable types of persons who could run things.
Yeah, you read the book. You read the book, The Rise of the Conservative Legal Movement by Steve
I
Tellis.
started, yeah, part of the
It's
way
very good.
through.
Yeah,
Very,
it's
yeah.
very
The
good.
first couple of chapters are very insightful, and it really gets at the need to build something with a core of committed people. So if you look at when sensible ideas have survived when they have overwhelming numbers against them, it's things like the Federalist Society, a tiny group of people, not that big of a budget, but really committed to their ideas, not trying to reach out and build the big tent. Well, we'll get like the 75% woke people on our side. And no, we want the 0% woke people,
Yeah,
and we want to focus. A couple, rational expectations and monetarism survived in economics, and both had problems, but they were much more sensible than the dominant idea. They just picked two Federal Reserve banks, and they just took over, and then they kept their ideas functioning in those two places. So yeah, but it was all committed people. As soon as you try to have this big tent where we're like, oh no, we want to make sure at least half the people are actually on the left, and that way we can show how reasonable and open we are. Well, then those half the people on the left will always support other people on the left and will crush you because you're trying to be objective, and you have to
yeah.
build
So
institutions
it sounds
with.
like to be a to beat the left at universities, you have to sort of become like them, right? It sort of seems like every ideological movement has to be this way. It's not like it's not like you go and you have a free marketplace of ideas, and then they say X and you say Y, and then people say, oh, Y is smarter than X, and you don't coordinate with
Yeah,
anyone or have any strategy or anything. It seems like it's a very the sort of the marketplace of ideas sort of metaphor. It sort of seems like very naive, and it seems like it's never worked. It doesn't work that way. It's never worked that way.
the
The
market
people who took
the
over
marketplace for
academia,
ideas the marketplace for ideas has to take place between different institutional infrastructures. You can't have, you know, I mean, there's a broad set of ideas that could operate within one institution, but they don't include the dominant ideas. So you can't have a marketplace of ideas where you have woke people and non-woke people under the same administrative oversight, because the woke people's philosophy is get control of administration and silence everyone else. So you could have a whole bunch of different people with different perspectives who all embrace the idea of free debate operating in one institution, although that may, people will embrace the idea in principle, and uh, so. But you have to create administrative structures that don't allow people who want to silence one group to do so, because nobody gets silenced because their ideas are bad. They get silenced because they're not as able or willing to take over the administrative infrastructure to silence people. Like, really stupid ideas win at universities because the really stupid ideas include, oh, we should take over all the committees and drive out everybody. Right. So that's the survival of ideas within bureaucracies depends on it's almost almost evolutionary. Like the really fit ideas are the ideas that cause you to take over bureaucratic systems, not that are actually good for governing society. Nothing about being good for governing society makes you more likely to get control of
But
a
then
university.
the marketplace. But is it the marketplace of ideas? Then is it? It's sort of impossible because if you're just sort of out there, you're staying within the. Let's say you built a free speech university, and you had the woke people and you had the non-woke. The woke people will take over. It has to
Oh,
be a political program. It
you,
cannot be a purely intellectual
yeah, you have
program.
to say. I mean, you have to be ideologically committed to the idea of pursuit of objective truth. I mean, you need a commitment to that, and you need to say people who aren't pursuing objective truth don't belong in this institution. You can't say, "Oh yeah, of course we'll have a place for critical social justice in our free speech university." No, you've got to. I mean, and this is not novel ideas. Like Karl Popper went through this pretty carefully. Like you can't just sort of willy nilly like. I mean, this is what drives me nuts about like this sort of Red Scare stuff. Obviously, you shouldn't have been bringing communists into universities, because the whole idea of communism in the United States, at least, was to take over institutions, destroy your enemies, and then use those institutions to promote communism. Obviously, that, fine, we want to not make that illegal, sure, but that obviously is not the sort of thing you can have within a university where you're trying to debate ideas on the basis of reason and evidence. Like, no, we need, if you want your little communist shop, you go over and you fund it yourself over here, and we'll take the tax money and have like objective reason. But everyone, the Republicans are so, and conservatives are so scared of ever doing anything that looks like it might go against free speech, and they don't bother understanding the subtleties of it, that they're allergic to the idea of interfering in universities, because they're like, oh no, we don't want to trample the. They have almost no principles, but this is the one principle they have, is that we'll never interfere with how the left does things at universities, because that would be against our principles, and they're not solving the fixed point problem. Sorry, now I'm getting.
No, that's all great. So what can people what can people do? We have a lot of listeners. Some of them are donors to causes. Some of them are involved in politics. Some of them might be involved in Texas, philanthropy or politics. Is there things that they can do for you?
I mean, there needs to be a lot of pressure on politicians in Texas, specifically, and in these states, to actually make radical changes to the university. And that means not going back to the well of fake conservatives that you think are going to do things. There needs to be major reform at the state level. Like, these are state entities. We're writing large checks to people. Those checks need to come with an agreement to do things. There needs to be an absolute ban on all diversity, equity, and inclusion statements, all diversity, equity, and inclusion offices. All that needs to go. If you want to have people watching compliance, the DEI offices are the ones that are violating the law more than anyone else. Put in a few lawyers and say enforce civil rights law, which is going to cause a huge problem for universities, because they violate, they have all these programs designed that. Get rid of all DAI bureaucracy. That's a minimum. Get rid of university leadership that is sympathetic to DEI and CRT. Put
And,
serious
and,
people
and
in
there's
charge.
and there's nothing there is not. I mean, the critical race theory stuff. I think people will say First Amendment, blah blah blah. That there's nothing you can write a law tomorrow that says no DEI statements
Yeah,
or administrators in a university. A Republican legislator can do that. A Republican legislator can legislative body can pass that. A governor can sign it. There's nothing here that is
yeah, and
impossible.
and you can make, you can say, and we're going to establish units within the university that are going to allow you to get through this university without having to repeat critical race theory nonsense, right? The other, yeah, sure, okay. So if you really want to, let these faculty continue to spout this nonsense, but they should not have the right to keep a student away from a degree because he doesn't say in their class what they want them to say. Our faculty will fail you if you don't regurgitate the critical race theory nonsense to them. And they have at least 2 critical race theory requirements at UT through these flags that we have. And that's true in a lot of places. Anyone that has anywhere that has a diversity or social justice requirement, that's saying that in order to get this certification from the state, you must adhere, at least state your adherence to a particular political ideology. That should be wiped out. That's not a violation of the First Amendment to say you're not allowed to force the students to hold a certain political view. So those are like low-hanging fruit, no-brainers. Absolutely should happen. And if you're giving money to a politician and he's not saying that should happen, then you need to rethink whether that's somebody you actually
Yeah, so I mean,
support.
this is yeah. So I mean, like if a Republican politician wants to ban guns or something, I mean, they will get primaried and they will lose, right? I think the problem with this one is it's so it's so like the status quo. Like a politician can never get in trouble for just doing the status
Yeah,
quo, and the status quo is always just letting this thing go on
right.
autopilot. So you
Yes,
need
somehow the status quo came down to Republicans voting large amounts of money to people to engage in communist activism.
yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
just what's okay. And now it's worse. Like I'd go back to communism over what these people want now.
Yeah, the good old days of communist run
Back when
university.
the KGB was actually carefully controlling this stuff, it at least had some coherence to it. Now it's all gone so wild without those guys. Like those guys got busy with other things, and it just kind of took on a life of its own.
Yeah. So okay. So yeah, there's possibilities for political action here
There's
on
a
the question.
lot that could be done. It's just puzzling that nobody seems to want to do it.
Yeah. Okay. So there's I think I'm optimistic. I mean the K through 12 stuff. I mean you said that's people are getting serious about that. I mean it does seem like a lot's going on. School boards, elections, things are happening. I mean it's just getting conservatives to care about universities and wokeness. That battle is won. It's just explaining to them the mechanics,
And
making
it,
it a little more sophisticated.
and it's really important that people understand that no matter if you don't fix universities, you don't fix education schools. You don't fix education schools. You don't get the craziness out of K through 12. You can write all the laws you want, but if you keep having people coming through the University of Texas Education School and going and teaching your kids, it's going to be awful. Write whatever you want to write in a bill. It won't work if you've still got these people um, running it.
Gotcha.
Like these are the people who want critical race theory for 4-year-olds, and they're the ones training the teachers who are going to teach your children. And that's not great. It's not just a bunch of whiny faculty with, you know, on our little clouds bouncing around. We actually do. Sadly, universities do affect society. I wish it wasn't true, but it's true.
Well, some people
Um,
have pointed to some data saying that maybe they don't. I think that the problem with that data is I think they create activists. So even if 90 it goes over the head of 98% of students, if you create 2% people who are crazy enough to, it's probably more than 2%, whatever, 5 or 10% enough to take this stuff seriously. I mean, they're the ones who are gonna push everyone else around. So
and
yeah,
then
I
they're the
don't.
ones who decide to go work for the government. They're the ones who go into, they're trained not only to believe crazy things, but they're trained to take control of bureaucratic apparatus to promote that. So
Yeah. So yeah, I would not. Yeah. So I would not. The people maybe who have seen those studies. About the average student and whether they get shifted right or left. I would not take that as too important as to what's the influence of the universities. Okay. So Rich, are you still trying to do something at the University of Texas? Are you going back to your finance journals, or what's the sort of the plan for you from here?
well, I mean, the University of Texas is probably a lost cause until somebody replaces the leadership. So nothing good is going to come of that. I'm hoping I want to make sure that people don't keep. I mean, I feel really guilty. We took money, we got money from taxpayers, and it's now been stolen by grifters. So I want to make sure that that doesn't keep going. That's a huge priority for me, is making sure that, like, I feel like I don't want to just walk away from having taken $6 million from taxpayers and having it squandered on insanity. So I want to make sure that doesn't happen. I'm trying to sort of write things to try to get things out there, and maybe I have some further ideas that are floating around that maybe too early to be sure. But I'm not giving up yet, because something has to be done. It's really bad. But yeah, UT is a lost cause, though.
Okay, well, we'll be keeping touch, and keep
Yeah,
paying attention to what you're doing. So yeah, thanks a lot, Rich. It's been a great
great.
great talking to you.
Thank you.